Shadow of the Colossus was ahead of its time. Although I have only played the remake of the game, the core ideas and themes of the game still remains intact. The stunning art, the scale of the world, and you know it, the big boss fights. Shadow of the Colossus has some of the greatest boss fights in gaming. From the way some of the bosses present gimmicks to an action-packed chase, the bosses in Shadow of the Colossus are truly sublime. However, there is one boss for me personally that had a far greater impact on me than any other boss from the game. It is none other than the third Colossus, dubbed by fans as Gaius. But before we get into the details of the battle, I've got to set some pre-game context before the fight. Before going up against Gaius, we have to face the first two Colossi. One of them is a bipedal giant, whilst the other, also a giant, which walks on all fours. Although as beings they might be completely different, they do share one common element, that of which highlight the key feature of these battles, the climbing. If you think back on the gameplay of Shadow of the Colossus, two things should come to mind. A, that aggro is the worst controlling horse in all of gaming, and B, that climbing these Colossi gives a feeling like no other. The thrill of figuring out how to scale the Colossi, from observing their behaviors, their movements, attacks, and idle motions, all of them together give you hints on how to take them down, and most importantly, the game encourages this battle of patience. Not just patience of waiting for the slow and methodical movements of the Colossi, but the patience needed within you to find a solution. Both these core concepts are introduced, although to varying effects, by the first two Colossi. The first Colossus, named Valus by fans, is very straightforward, but does its job in presenting the thrill of climbing the towering beings. You first see it walking away, where you use your sword to spot its weak points, before you then make the climb starting from its foot and go all the way to the top. Although there is no patience of waiting for Valus other than stamina management when it starts to get irritated, Valus is an excellent tutorial boss on just the raw emotions you feel. The thrill, victory, and sadness you feel from this fight are just a fraction of what you will feel later on in the game. The second Colossus, not so much. Dubbed Quadratus, I find it to be one of the weakest Colossi in the game, because the way to damage it is waiting for it to show its hooves, where its weak point lies, you then use your bow and arrow to shoot it down, and then climb. It's painfully boring for me personally, as even if you miss your shots, the Colossi just doesn't give this urgency for you to take it down, it just exists. But taking this balance between strategy and emotions, this is where the excellence of the third Colossus shines. Now, let me set the tone with a poem of old, which I just completely made up for the sake of this video. Wonder returns once more to the temple of old, where the voice beckons to go once more. Stepping stones, back comes our loyal steed, having found us in this humble hall. We venture deep into the lands, mountains tall, deserts wide, trudging along with glistering pride. We are to fight our next foe on a canopy that can reach the skies, past the lonely mountains, and there it lies, a path or steed which it cannot take, for it is a path we must venture along alone. Climbing the desolate stone, we see a giant with a sword. I hope that small yet basic poem, or whatever that was that I wrote up, set the tone, because now for the fight. The first thing to note about Gaius is its stature. Gaius towers above the player, and I mean really towers. Apart from 3 of the endgame bosses in the game, no boss has this same stature and confidence like Gaius. Adding on to its gigantic height, we also have to acknowledge how high above the main ground we are. This plateau that we are fighting on isn't just high above the mountain, which you have to scale to get here, but the mountain is also one of the highest peaks in the entire game, giving this very strong feeling of life or death. This massive giant, slow in its movements, comes closer to you and you are fragile in its shadow. From just a visual aesthetic, this is one of the best backdrops in the entire game. And because there isn't anything on the plateau other than the Colossus and you, this minimalistic design choice adds to the feeling of life and death that I mentioned. Unlike some of the other later encounters, where there are abandoned temples, caves, or towers that have more going on in them, they don't quite capture the same feeling. Shadow of the Colossus is a game which I think is best when it does as little as possible with the world and its bosses, and that's exactly how Gaius attacks as well. The third Colossus has one sword as its primary attack, whereas its legs serve as secondary ways of damage. Gaius swings his rock blade in your direction, and although slow at first, can come quite close to hitting you if you aren't paying attention. And that is where the strength of this encounter lies. First you have to get it to break its wrist on the disc thing, and then to actually climb the Colossus, you have to grab onto its sword when it attacks and hold on for dear life, as once it retreats the sword, you are in for a wild ride, as you're going to have to climb up its arm. And from here on out, it's smooth sailing. You climb up the arm, do some light platforming with some structures that are still sticking out of the being, and then climb up its fur and damage its weak points. Now, I know what you might be thinking, this boss fight sounds very bare bones. There doesn't seem to be any difficulty in how to take it out. There are no puzzles like the later Colossi, and there isn't much going on either, both in the background and in how Gaius moves around. And to that I say, you're completely right, because really there isn't much going on in this fight. But just because not much is going on doesn't mean that it cannot stir up any emotions within us, emotions that exceed everything that is going on. A few sentences ago, I said that I think Shadow of the Colossus is at its best when it does as little as possible. Gaius isn't the only boss that has little to nothing going on with it, but it's the first one that really hammers it home. A lot of people rank this boss highly, and so do I, and I think it's because of the aesthetics from this boss. Whereas the very first boss in the game showcased the despair one might feel from killing an innocent being, and the second Colossus just showcased true boredom, Gaius here showcases the thrill of these battles against giants in the best way possible. I'm struggling right now. I'm trying to figure out how exactly to phrase this part of why the fight works, but I just can't. There are just emotions and feelings that I can think of, no real reason as to why it works. It felt epic climbing the sword, seeing it lift me up into the air and seeing how tall Gaius was, and above all, pun not intended, how far above the world we were. I could see the desert, the river, and the massive bridge connecting to the temple that we started in. Just the scale and wonder of it all, it's just breathtaking. Now I can describe it better. It's the sense of wonder. That's the real emotion I feel from this fight. Wonder at the scale of the world, wonder of the being I'm about to take down, and wonder at what adventures lie beyond, deeper into the Forbidden Lands. With the protagonist also being called Wonder, I think that also alludes to the core message that can be seen in this fight. We aren't just wandering around the lands to find out how to save Mono, the girl we are trying to save who's at the temple. We are also simply just wandering. On top of the head of Gaius is the highest point in the game, and this is where our thoughts and feelings wander. They wander from why these beings must be slain, why the world is barren of life, why they're separated from one another, and why we are doing this in the first place. This fight, it's just got this magic to it. We can see the world from above the skies, fighting a swordsman of great strength, and letting our mind wander all over the place with the emotions we feel. The reason why people call Shadow of the Colossus a work of art is the beauty it showcases in the world, and I think the fight with Gaius is one of the best showcases of this. Truly a work of art. Gaius is up there as one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. It was at this boss where the game finally clicked with me. Although some bosses later on got on my nerves with how not fun they felt to play through, I kept thinking back to some of the greater fights in the game, how they'd showcase the joy, thrill, and scale of taking down these titans, and Gaius was always a fight I came back to. From its presentation to the puzzle itself, I think the third Colossus is not only one of the best bosses in the entire game, but also of all time, and that's my piece on it. With that, welcome to the end of the video. Before I go any further, I want to thank Charlie for the video idea. He suggested to me a few videos back on a comment, and I want to shout him out for it. He makes great gameplay videos and also has a really great series of podcast episodes under his Solo for Life podcast. Do check him out, highly recommend. But back to the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and a dislike if you didn't enjoy the video, as both come a long way in helping me make better videos, as I can see what type of videos work or do not work. But let me know, what are some of your favorite encounters in Shadow of the Colossus? Leave them down below, as I would like to hear how they resonated with you. I do plan to cover some more bosses from the game, but that will be for another time. If you want to see more videos from me, a subscribe really means a lot. With that said, I think I'm going to work on some more video ideas and play some more video games, so I think that's all from me. Thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your day, night, and week. And with that, Storm out.